Okay, great. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining to hear our zED talk on Red Hat Ansible for Z. Our presenter today is Dan Jast, who is the IBM Go-to-Market Offering Manager for Ansible on Z. He's been in this role for several months now, transitioning from a previous role focusing on Z modernization tools in the Poughkeepsie Client Experience Center. Also with us here today are some of Dan's counterparts from the technical and offering management team. They'll be here to help monitor the chat and answer questions throughout the presentation. As such, if you have questions, please put them in the Q&A area throughout the session, and we'll address as many of them as we can. And we'll also hopefully have some time at the end to answer some of those verbally. Also be aware that this session will be recorded, and I'll send out the link of the recording once it's available. And finally, there will be a poll at the end after you close out your WebEx window that will have a few questions. So if you could answer those, that would be very helpful for us to improve in the future. And with that, I'll pass it on to you, Dan.
Awesome. Thanks, Brian, and thanks everyone for joining today. So you definitely see a bunch of familiar names there in the attendee list. So thanks for joining. Happy to have you. So here we're here today to talk about Red Hat Ansible certified content for IBM Z. I think some of you in the chat have already gotten this spiel before. So if you have any additional questions that come up, just as Brian said, feel free to throw them in the Q&A, and hopefully we'll give you some new content here as we've been updating this deck. So why don't we get started? So just kind of a quick agenda of what we'll be covering today. First, we're going to look at the kind of what the automation landscape is, and that goes beyond what that automation landscape is on Z, right? Because we want to add Z into the wider automation strategy that enterprises are undertaking today. So we'll kind of touch on that and where Ansible fits into play and how that brings value to the Z community as well. Then we'll kind of go into the weeds a little bit there, right, about ZOS and Ansible and really what we're producing from an IBM perspective to extend these capabilities. We'll go into some use cases, what are we trying to achieve with this Ansible automation, what are clients looking at to use this to automate in their environments. We have a bunch of good examples there. I'll then probably hop out of the presentation to kind of show you these collections that we're providing from IBM, show you what is involved in those, what they encompass, and then I'll show you some sample playbooks, some sample automation, and even if time allows, maybe I'll hop into VS Code and do a quick demo for you all. So as we said, any questions throughout, just throw them in the Q&A. I have a great team of technical and offering management folk on the call today. Just to introduce them really quick, Eric Sue is my counterpart on the offering management side who covers the Ansible core. If you don't know what that means, you'll learn very quickly what that means. Kevin Height is our STSM and lead architect around the Ansible front, and great technical resource to know. Brian Pertnyarchin is the technical lead and development lead on the Ansible solution automation side. So there's really not many better people to be on the call here today to answer your questions. And if one of them can't answer it, I'd be very surprised. So definitely get test their knowledge in the Q&A as well. So let's get into it. So kind of getting into this automation landscape, right? There's teams automating across the enterprise. And all those teams, right, they look very different, right? There's the network team, there's the security team, right? When we're talking about Z, right, we have our system programmers, our application developers, our operations folks. There's a lot of different teams. But when it comes to ZOS, right, a lot of these teams are using very different tools, right? The experiences that they're going through can be very, very different. And it creates these silos, right? And that's really where we start getting into some of the pain points when it comes to having automation and tooling and skill sets on Z, right? Is that there's this separation issue that we're dealing with, and it's a challenge now with new hires coming onto the platform. It's a challenge with more experienced employees in your organizations learning the skill sets to keep modernizing and implementing improvements into the environments. It's also, right, it's not consistent. There's a lot of inconsistency about how things are happening on the distributed side versus the Z side. And really, what we're trying to target here and what Ansible is all about is providing that centralized control plane really for your automation across your enterprise, right? Where this centralized automation platform, it looks the same across all of these different teams. It requires the same skill set to write, an Ansible playbook across all these teams, as well as the language, the look, the feel, the way you work with Ansible. So it's the same from the distributed side, the Z side, as well as across the different tools and skill sets that you're working with across your teams. And that's really what Ansible is all about. Um, there's two main parts when we talk about Ansible. But Ansible itself is an enterprise framework for automating IT operations, right? And really that comes down to these two major parts. The Ansible engine, this is the YAML-based syntax that you write Ansible playbooks with. When you're writing your Ansible playbooks, right, this is how you write those same YAML syntax across all those different teams, across all those different, platforms that you're working with and trying to automate against as well. And then when we want to really enterpriseify this, right, we want to orchestrate this and get that graphical look and feel to managing this automation as we're kicking it off and scheduling, that's really where Ansible Tower comes into play. And Ansible Tower is that management GUI interface for Ansible to allow you to orchestrate playbooks, view, output, and really gives you that, complete look and feel for having that complete automation platform across your enterprise. So, why did IBM think that this was really important, and why did we want to really go after Ansible here, right? And one of the major reasons for that is Ansible is one of the most widely used automation tools in the industry today. To prove those points, there's a couple of stats here on the page. The first of which on the left-hand side is that Ansible has been the #9 open source project on GitHub from October 1st, 2018 through September 2019, and it's continuing to keep at that really high pace of contributions on the GitHub front. There's a lot of different companies and teams and organizations that are contributing content into Ansible and building out its capabilities on a weekly basis. It's very impressive to see. There's and another example of that is how many modules, and a module is a way that you are executing automation with Ansible. I'll go into that a little bit further in some future slides here. But since 2.8, and 2.8 is the previous version of Ansible, we've seen over 3,000 modules added, and it's very, very impressive to see just how much content is being contributed into this community, and then seeing on the other side of that how much of that is being used by the Ansible community as well. So it's very, very prevalent in the industry today, and adding the Z portfolio to those capabilities is just another advantage for both Z and for Ansible itself. Okay, so let's get into kind of what we're providing now from IBM. So the Red Hat Ansible automation platform and Red Hat Ansible certified content for IBM Z. So what we are trying to do is, from an IBM perspective, we are trying to provide collections that are specific to interact, right, with ZOS and ZOS resources. And the real reasons of why we want to do that, right, is one, the flexibility. This allows us to manage, right, ZOS as if we were managing any other infrastructure. So x86, distributed, Power, Z can all be managed using the same centralized automation platform. Really good, and that speaks right to the consistency as well, right? There's that same automation platform, same look and feel with the YAML syntax-based playbooks, and you just get that that central control and consistent look and feel across your entire IT infrastructure. And lastly, Ansible is not very hard to learn itself. YAML syntax is pretty easy to pick up. And this really plays into the skills and the persona, challenges that we face on ZOS, right? With new hires coming onto the platform, new hires can, accelerate their onboarding processes and become much more capable for their organizations by learning a tool like Ansible to then, automate with and start writing, playbooks with to complete tasks and accelerate processes for their teams. We have a great example of that. I have a couple blogs highlighted at the end of this, and these slides will be provided, as Brian mentioned. So definitely check out some of the blogs, but there's a great blog from one of our actual IBM interns who tells the story through an interview type of article there, where he tells how he had no Z experience coming into his internship at IBM, and he was put right into a testing role, testing middleware on the operating system. So no joke of a role when it comes to working on ZOS. Had no green screen experience, had no ZOS experience, and by learning Ansible was able to be extremely productive and capable for his team. And that experience is highlighted in that blog. I'll highlight that when I get to the end of the slides. It's a great read to see just how valuable this can be to someone new in your organization. So then from an IBM perspective on what we are providing, as I said, we are providing collections. So collections are a grouping of capabilities to target a specific area, of the operating system or a piece of middleware, or whatever this case may be. So I'll touch on what collections we have today, but initially, what we're really focused on is collections that are going to provide you the basic building blocks to getting started of automating on ZOS today. So the big one that you'll hear about from us today, and you'll see online, is the ZOS Core collection. This is the one targeted at the ZOS operating system itself. And if you've ever worked with ZOS MF APIs or Zoe, a lot of those type of functions are pretty similar from that perspective, right? Working with data sets, working with jobs, issuing operator commands, TSO commands, fetching and pulling data from the system. A lot of different options from that perspective. Now we're also looking at collections, and there's going to be a lot more collections in the future beyond what you're going to see today, and I'll touch on that a little bit as well. But we're also looking at collections to focus further into the middleware products and on tools that are on our platform as well. So today we have specific collections out there on the open source community for IMS, as well as ZOSMF. And there's a couple more that I'll highlight that I know that are in the works that you can get excited about that are coming out within the next in the future here coming up. So let's look at some of the use cases of what we're really looking at around Ansible and what some of our clients have told us they're looking forward to using Ansible for. So one up top, that's a big one that we've seen pretty regularly: provisioning and maintenance. This is how we can do automated provisioning and maintenance of middleware products on our systems, or even the ZOS libraries themselves, by automatically driving SMPE type tasks, and or driving the provisioning of middleware through the provisioning tools and or scripts provided by those products. So if you had a lot of developers that are writing an application to interact with Kix and you needed more Kix regions, you wouldn't have to go through the normal process that a lot of shops are going through today to manually provision those regions to support those developers. You create the playbook that can provision a Kix region for you, and you kind of have that self-service model that the developers can follow instead of the manual intervention that Kix professionals would need to follow today. Configuration management's another great one. Let's say we have more developers are working in a ZOS Connect server, and they need to be deploying APIs into that server on a regular basis, and they don't want to have to interact with the ZOS Connect team to do that. They want that self-service model as well. That's where configuration management and stuff like that can come into play, right? There's a lot of different configuration management type of use cases. The ZOS Connect one's just an example, but there are a lot of different things in configuration management as well. Security automation, I think this is always a great one. We have a client who's currently looking at security automation from a use case perspective of, they have RACF manage their certificates that they use across, their enterprise, and they want to have an automated renewal process of those certificates there in RACF. At Ansible's, checking to make sure they're not expired, or when they are coming up to being expired, someone's getting notified and they're going through the renewal process in an automated fashion. We could also do, user ID management, and I'll show you a nice, cool use case that we already created around that you can start consuming today. So a lot of great, security automation use cases as well. Moving on, CI/CD application and deployment, right? This can fit right into the CI/CD processes and application deployment processes that, that we've been mentioning across the first three use cases as well. So the developers that are, that are working on their applications or, working in their pipelines, this just provides more automation at their fingertips, so they're not reliant upon others in their teams to get the job done, right? It's much more self-service. Orchestration, another great one. I think that you're kind of getting the point here, right? Where we have all this automation that we're creating. Now we can orchestrate all that automation with Ansible or with another tool that we're already orchestrating automation with. That can be pre-existing automation, right? So if you have your own Rex and JCL already existing on your systems, you can now use Ansible to automate the execution of that and schedule that. Or you create your own brand new automation by leveraging the Ansible framework, and you start automating that way as well. Lots of options on the orchestration front. And then probing the mainframe is another one we've heard a lot of interest in from our clients. Collecting information, getting system status and doing health checks. This is a great area for us to look into as well, of getting rapid information about our systems, to really provide the system programmers and operations folk in your teams the ability to act on certain actions that are going to be registered during the probing of the mainframe for information. So how does this all work? Let's kind of start getting into this. So Ansible itself, this can be running in a couple different places, right? This can be running in the cloud. This can be running on a workstation. And then really what's happening from that area is you have a user who is writing an Ansible playbook. An Ansible playbook consists of exactly what you see here in this red box. So an inventory file is how we specify the different hosts that we want to be working against. So in that inventory file, you can have your x86, hosts, your Z hosts, your power hosts, really lots of options there. And that's kind of at the level where we can define in our playbook what the spread and what the scope of systems that we want to be automating against are. Then in those playbooks that we're actually writing consist of modules, and modules, as I mentioned, are kind of those tasks that we're trying to complete on the mainframe. So we'll have multiple modules compiled into a single playbook to complete a use case. Skipped ahead again accidentally. Plugins extend the capabilities of modules. So from that perspective, I know we have a plugin for encoding. So if we're working with, data sets or fetching data to and from the system, and we want to specify what type of encoding we want to, receive or provide that content with, that's where, a plugin can come into play by extending the base capabilities of a module. And then the CLI, the Ansible CLI runs, on that control node. And I'll touch on what the control node is in a second here. And that's how you're going to execute your playbooks, test your playbooks, and how you can get a lot of different information about your Ansible environment as well. And then once these playbooks are executed, right, we can be working against our different network devices, our different hosts, or against our different, systems that are hosted in the cloud. So this is how we kind of provide that wide scope of capabilities that Ansible can automate against. So as I mentioned, there's a control node. So this is a topic that we talk a lot about here. And the control node is an interesting topic because today the control node, and since we're talking to a Z audience, this always comes up. Because we're talking about the Ansible control node, the Ansible control node today does not run on Z today, officially, from a Red Hat support perspective. So what we are suggesting from an IBM perspective here is that this is officially supported on distributed systems today. So the Ansible control node should be running on distributed. And then how we are then interacting with ZOS is from this control machine here. We are SSHing into Unix system services of our ZOS host and executing different commands in Unix system services based off of the different prerequisites that are defined, for different Ansible collections, or we can just be calling different APIs that different products are supporting, right? So MQ, Kix, DB2, ZOS Connect, all have their own APIs that are supported, and we can call those directly into those products as well. And this is where we can be driving with that inventory file that I mentioned before. That's where we can be driving all this automation across all our different LPARs, our other network devices, distributed platforms, and our whole enterprise across the board there. And that's where managed nodes come into play. So all those devices that the control node are managing, we call managed nodes, and those can be right ZOS and any other really infrastructure that you're looking to manage with Ansible. So as I mentioned before, right, playbooks are nice, but how are we going to enterpriseify them? And that's really where Ansible Tower comes into play. So this is a great screenshot of Ansible Tower on the bottom right-hand side here. Ansible Tower is that GUI interface to allow you to orchestrate and manage your Ansible playbooks. There's a lot of great features that come along with Ansible Tower. Just to highlight, there's also a free open source version of Ansible Tower called AWX. So if you see anything about, Ansible Tower, AWX, one's the open source version, one's the officially supported version by Red Hat. That's just the delineation there. And this really provides you that centralized control for your Ansible automation platform across your enterprise. You can schedule here, you can create templates in here. There's role-based access and control here within Tower, and I could highlight that when I talk about the user ID use case a little bit here in the next couple, and then in the further in the presentation here. A lot of great features. This also provides its own APIs, so you can call them externally. So Ansible Tower provides a lot of extended capabilities upon the Ansible automation engine too. So how we're delivering content today, that's in two main ways here. So the first way is Ansible Galaxy. Ansible Galaxy is the open source community for Ansible content. So this is where you can go out there, get a lot of content, especially from our point. We're looking at this to kind of roll out content on the regular basis here. And we're rolling out a lot of our beta collections in here as well. So capabilities you might not see in the second method of consuming Ansible content, which is the Ansible Automation Hub. Ansible Automation Hub is the subscription required officially supported Ansible content that has been tested, by Red Hat themselves, and certified, and also with a support and service model backing it from Red Hat and IBM. So, if you're rolling this out into a production environment, we definitely suggest going with Ansible Automation Hub and getting a subscription there. But if you're looking to explore the capabilities of Ansible and kind of, doing an internal POC to see if this is something you want to work with and automate with, Ansible Galaxy is a great place to start as well. And as I mentioned, that's where you'll see a lot of the, the early releases from the IBM side on the capabilities that we're producing. Not is it only that we can contribute content from an IBM perspective to Galaxy or Automation Hub, but anyone can, right? This is specifically Galaxy is the open source community. So if you have a product or a tool that you want to manage with Ansible or automate against with Ansible, definitely investigate, what you can do around contributing content to Ansible Galaxy. And coming out from IBM in the future, we'll have a process where you can work with us to contribute content to this space as well. So look out for that. So kind of putting everything I just discussed together. So starting at the bottom, right, we have our different ZOS hosts that we're going to be automating against. And then we have, right, our playbooks that consist of plugins, modules and tasks, roles, and collections, right, which contain all of the three that were just mentioned. Those playbooks can live in GitHub, right? Those can be source control managed in your GitHub repositories. Those modules, plugins, and roles for the collections are pulled from either Automation Hub or Galaxy. And then when we're executing and testing those playbooks, we are working with the Ansible CLI on the control node to do that work. Now up top here, right, if we wanted to take that enterprise look and feel to this, that's where Ansible Tower and AWX come into play, right? Where we can either work against the Ansible Tower REST APIs, the CLI, or the web UI to manage, orchestrate, schedule, and view the output for these Ansible playbooks as they execute across the enterprise. So this is kind of how all the pieces fit together when it comes to Ansible. So just looking at this from like a broader landscape point of view here, starting out on the left, this is how we would be executing, our playbooks. So this can be being executed from a Jenkins pipeline. There's actually a Jenkins plugin for Ansible, so you can, execute playbooks as any other step in your pipeline. You can have customized portals, right? Any type of orchestrator you're working with to call APIs, or issue commands on your control node to execute those playbooks. Tower provides its own APIs, as I have mentioned, as well as the CLI that's supported for Tower as well on the control node there. Then, as I mentioned, that control node is running on an x86 system today. where we have our tower and Ansible engine control node running. And then that's how we're interacting from this environment here into our ZOS instance through SSH or through those REST APIs. If we're interacting through SSH, these are the prereqs here. So Rex, which pretty popular on the systems. I don't think I need to speak much about the Rex requirement there. Python, we do have a requirement on the new IBM Open Enterprise edition of Python. That's what we are supporting from an Ansible perspective and what we will be building off of moving forward. And then ZOpen Automation Utilities. This is a free product that's actually packaged with a couple different IBM products as well, but you can also download that from ShopZ or via PAX file, yourself. And this provides a command line interface upon Unix system services that extends the capabilities of what you can do against ZOS within Unix system services. And that's how we complete a lot of the different tasks across our collections by executing certain, commands and utilities here provided by ZOpen Automation Utilities that then can, hit different pieces of the operating system. On the bottom part, right, we also can work through REST APIs. So ZOSMF is a great example because of all the great REST APIs that it provides. But that can also be, a Kix, an MQ, a DB2, ZOS Connect, a lot of different options that ZOS, the REST APIs that we can interact with are here. And that could be beyond those type of middleware products, right? Hardware Management Console provides its own APIs. So we could even be looking at it from an LPAR management perspective too, if we really wanted to. So there's a lot of different opportunities that APIs bring to the table, and you'll be seeing more use cases and stories coming out for us as we, dive deeper into the REST API space as well here. Now, we do have Zoe CLI on this slide, and while I don't really want to highlight it too much, the reason for that is because Ansible does have the ability to drive command line interfaces. So if you were if you had a lot of work already invested into Ansible, into the Zoe CLI where you're running, scripts with the Zoe CLI and creating automation there, and now you need something to orchestrate those scripts or orchestrate commands that, you're just trying to execute themselves with Zoe. That's right where we could either have something like a Jenkins kicking off those scripts themselves or have Ansible just calling those commands on the host system to execute and go there. So a lot of options for how you can automate with Ansible. So another way that we're going to see Ansible coming prevalent in this space is along the lines of having Ansible running within certain products from IBM. So if you're familiar with the Cloud Broker today, the Cloud Broker leverages the ZOSMF cloud provisioning and management capabilities for provisioning middleware, provisioning regions within middleware as well, stuff like that. And this is where we can have Ansible engine running here within Cloud Broker as well. So if we wanted to do, more customized tasks or smaller tasks that we don't want to have to create templates and workflows for on the ZOSMF side, this is where we can have a small playbook being executed that leverages, the collections we're putting out across those products that you're trying to automate and provision against with Cloud Broker. And that's where, the Ansible engine can run, and kind of you have that two-method approach almost to provisioning and automating with the Cloud Broker in your ZOS environments today. So with this, I'm going to hop off the presentation really quickly, just so we can see some other things really quickly and see this content in action here. So let's first look at the collection. So if we went on to Ansible Galaxy, this is Ansible Galaxy here. I'm just going to refresh this so I make sure I'm live. All right, looking good. So this is Ansible Galaxy. As I mentioned, this is the open source kind of community for Ansible content for IBM Z, or not for IBM Z, for everything. And this is kind of the IBM organization where we are putting our content. Wow, it's slow all of a sudden. But this is kind of the area where we are putting our content. So you could see here, if I wanted to search up top for ZOS, I could even search even at the higher level too. We find these three collections that are out there today. And as I mentioned, these are the three collections from IBM that you can download on Galaxy today. So big one that we've kind of been, that has seen the most attention, as you can see, 4,247 downloads in a little bit over 6 months there. So really good, numbers there that we're pretty proud of. On the IMS side, we have also a collection out there for doing IMS related tasks. This one's a little bit more recently published. And then as well ZOSMF for doing some of those, workflow orchestration and management type tasks as well. So let's hop into the core collection, and there's a couple different things we want to look at in here. First of all, when you're downloading an Ansible collection, it's very easy to do so. You come on this page, right? There's a quick copy to clipboard for this command right here, and once you install that Ansible CLI onto your control node, that comes with this, Ansible CLI, especially this Ansible Galaxy command line interface command here to install a collection. So you just issue this command. It pulls from the latest repositories on Ansible Galaxy. When if you want to download a specific version, you could also specify the different versions that we're looking at here, and that's how you can download a collection very easy just by working with through the Ansible command line interface there. You can also download a tarball if you wanted to and install it manually. So hopping out into the content side of this, we have a lot of different modules, and these are where we're starting to have those different tasks that we can complete by working with Ansible. And this is a nice interface that we can see here for looking through all those modules, but I'd prefer to look at it through our documentation site, which is actually linked right here on the front page. So if you go scroll down a little bit in the README, there's a visit the documentation site section right here. And that's where we get into this documentation site that our team has done a great job with. And what this documentation site will be is as we put different collections out into the automation hub, so we certify that content and it's available on the Red Hat Automation Hub platform, this is where you'll see all the documentation that supports those collections. So let's hop into core. You can see we have both core and IMS here. Actually, before I do that, the requirements section talks all about the prereqs across the control node and management node. Great information on how you install collections, especially if you're adding on those versioning type numbers there to your command, as well as the playbooks themselves. This talks about how you can develop some playbooks. We have a great hub here where we are also providing sample playbooks for you to get started, and you could see kind of what some of those use cases that we're already providing playbooks around, and some of the blogs as well that describe some of those that you can pull those into your environment and get started automating with those today. So hopping back out into the documentation, if we wanted to look at the collection and the module capabilities even further, this is where we can hop into the modules, and this is where we get our full list of modules and what we can do with them. So really simple one to start out with, right? TSO commands. This is how we can issue TSO commands through Ansible. So if we wanted to automate against RACF, right, we could be issuing RACF or ACF2 or top secret type commands right here with this command module from TSO. And what does this look like? There's a great examples section within this. See, I have as an example, there's a synopsis, parameters, examples, and return values. We can hop into the examples, and this is literally what you would copy and paste into your playbook to work with the TSO command module. So this is a great asset as you're learning Ansible syntax and as you're trying to develop your own playbooks. Come in here, look at the examples, and this is kind of where you can pull from and then modify to do what you're looking to do. So as obviously this would be doing a list user of a test user command, so a RACF command against the system here. Looking a little bit further into these, we could also look at data set, right? So this is managing ZOS data sets. And one really cool asset that I like to highlight here, and we'll look at this top example, I'll zoom in a little bit further so it's a little bit easier to see, is this module here. We name it to create a sequential data set if it does not exist. So Ansible kind of allows you to complete certain tasks in one module here. So we can complete multiple tasks in one module. So what this is doing here with this flag here of state present is if this data set does exist, we are not going to create a new data set, right? Because we don't want to overwrite the data that we already have in here. But because we're saying if it does not exist, if when this module runs and it sees that that data set has not been defined on our system, that's where we can, have that kind of logic flow going on in just a simple module here to say, okay, that data set doesn't exist, we can create it. And that's a great example of kind of how those how those multiple steps can be achieved via a simple single module by Ansible. And to complete that even further, that story, this is a module, the ZOS MVS raw module, that gets a lot of attention and is kind of showing how Ansible can change the way we do things on the platform and really simplify certain tooling and skill sets required to do automation on ZOS. And getting into this, what this is all about is this is doing it's basically building and submitting JCL for you without ever actually having to write JCL. So as you can see here, if you're familiar with JCL syntax, this is actually how you would normally build out JCL, right? All your DDs, we're defining a data set here, so we're specifying, our space and volume that we want that to be on, our record format type, and so on. So this is where in YAML syntax now we can define all the parameters, and then by the MVS raw module here working with the ZOAU command that supports this in the background, we are able to build this JCL based off of this this one step right here, put that into a temporary data set on the system, execute that job, and get the output all in a simple step right here, right? So that's a really cool look here of how we can take JCL, or how new hires on our systems, don't have to learn all the specific columns and spacing requirements and that JCL requires. And this is kind of the a new approach that can be taken to automating in ways with JCL today. So obviously, as products have their own programs that you can execute, you can specify the program name in here and execute the programs that you would like to execute there. So really cool capabilities that the MVS raw module provides as well. So lastly, I did want to just highlight this use case that we had just completed here. And this will, I think, serve pretty much as the demo for today, because I see that we're already getting close to that 2:45 time limit. So this is how one of our developers in IBM created a scenario where we are doing complete user ID management with Ansible through Ansible Tower here, or AWX in this case. So via the commands here that he lists, and I'll zoom in a little bit further so you can see that a little bit better. So we're in this use case here, we're using the TSO command module, dataset module, operator module for issuing operator commands, and the copy module for moving data between the the control node and the ZOS system. What we're able to do is we have two personas. We have Deb, who's our new ZOS developer, and Zach, who's our system programmer. When Deb is creating her applications, right, and she needs to get a new user ID to test this application with, she can come into AWX here, and she has the permission set for her role. So she doesn't have the ability to actually add the new user ID, but she has the ability to come in here to find this template for requesting a new user ID, and she can fill that out to her heart's desire here, specify the system she needs access to, the name of the user ID that she wants, and an email to support that. And she could hit submit here and launch that request. Then on the other side of that, right, here's a little workflow to see, right? She submits this. And then it's up to Zach, who then logs into Ansible Tower to see, hey, is this a valid request? Is the user ID is that user ID have the correct authority that she's correcting, or does it have too much authority that she's requesting? And then that he can kick off the add user playbook to then go through the process of the automated creation of that user ID in their environment. Then when he clicks that approval, and once that user ID is created, and we have a check at the end of that playbook to test that user ID is existing and accessible on the login side, then an email from Ansible can get sent out to that email that was specified for that user ID, with the user ID and password provided, so they can then access that. So this is just a great example of how we can do that role-based definitions here, as well as automating a repetitive task such as user ID addition on ZOS. Now this is really cool because this whole use case, as well as instructions on how to set this up, are provided in our sample user management playbooks in our sample repository. So everything that you just saw here is defined and documented on how to set this up within this GitHub repo here. So definitely, check this one out. Really cool use case. Great job from our developer Blake on working on this. Really, really great job done by him. So with that, I'm going to hop back to the presentation really quickly. So just a couple things here. Out of the box, Ansible can already communicate with ZOS, right? We can SSH into Unix system services and execute things on the Unix system services side that aren't pre-reqed by, Rex, ZOAU, by Rex and ZOAU, right? So we can execute USS commands, scripts, you can submit JCL from Unix system services with the command as well as copying data to and from ZOS. As I mentioned, we can also interact with any APIs across our systems via the Ansible out-of-the-box URI module. So this gives us a better look and feel of all the modules that work out of the box with Ansible. As we come close on time here, I'm not going to spend too much time on these, but you could definitely look through these slides on your own time. Excuse me. And there's also a lot of slides with examples of all of these that are hidden that you can look at and consume on your own time here as well. So how does that look, that URI module of executing an API? Right, we would be, specify as a get, a put, we specify our host name and our URL that we are trying to access, to execute this API with, right? Providing the authentication, providing the status code that we want returned from that API. And then once we execute that, right, this is kind of what it would look like from an Ansible perspective. Okay, here's that green positive result output that we're getting. From ZOSMF as we submit that API. From a ZOS product perspective, what do we have today and what is supported via the APIs or JCL and what's coming in the future? So ZOSMF, ZOS, and IMS, as we mentioned, are all available today, content in either Galaxy, and then there's certifications for some of this content that are coming very soon for uploads to Automation Hub. What we should see coming in the future, right? Kicks. We've been in talks with system automation, and then obviously there's a lot of products today that have APIs that are supported, or batch JCL type programs that you can interact with those products as well. So with that, right, almost the entire product line here that's mentioned on the left-hand side, either via the specific collections, APIs, or through JCL, we can interact with today. So with that, I'm going to kind of move a little bit forward here. I showed a lot of the modules. I'm going to kind of hop towards the end here and wrap up really quickly. Okay, great. So let's start here. So, how to get started. This is a great slide with a lot of great resources for you to get started on ZOS with using Ansible to manage ZOS. So all the links to all the prerequisites are here, and how you can install Ansible on your control node as well. And then on the ZOS side, here's all the prerequisites you need there as well, and all the versioning that's required. There is a survey included in this presentation that, if you download this and have the time, please fill this out. This is how we're kind of prioritizing use cases and collections to go after that our clients are interested. So if you want to help influence our direction for, the next collection or the use case that we provide the next sample playbook for, this is the best place to do that. So come in here. There's a link right to the survey in this slide. It's very quick to fill out, no more than 5-10 minutes. Really helps us prioritize our work on the IBM side. A lot of great blogs. Here's the link to that ZOS user management with Ansible blog that I was just showing from Blake. There's a lot of other great ones in here today. Here's that. Here's the one about the intern that with IBM who had nosy experience automating, on ZOS with Ansible. Great story to be told there, and a lot of other great content across the board here. Also, if you want to see any of the announcements that have come out from IBM and about our releases, that's where you can see some of these blogs here as well. If you want to try this today and you don't want to stand this up in your own environment, we have a Z trial. So you can go out there, request a virtual environment that has a guide in there. And here are the first 3 use cases that we're looking at that there's playbooks provided that you're going to execute and review. In this guided look and feel type of hands-on environment that you'll be provided. So definitely go try the Z trial. You can request that as many times as you want and provide that to as many of your employees in your organization to try this out. So great asset to kind of learn the basics of Ansible and get started automating. So definitely let us know, talk to us. Here's some of our names that are on the call today. Definitely reach out to us via email or Slack or any tool that you have access to, and we'll be happy to help you on your automation journey, or present this to your company directly so they can see the value of Ansible and start automating and getting that centralized control with Ansible today. So just thanks for your time. Really appreciate it. Thanks for Brian for organizing this, and I hope to hear from some of you as a follow-up to getting started on your automation journey with Ansible.
Awesome. Thanks, Dan. We appreciate you taking some time here to present today. And an additional thank you to Eric, Kevin, Bryant, and Haley for monitoring the chat and putting some really good information in there. It looked like there was some good conversation going on, so that's really good to see. Hopefully they were able to cover all the questions that anyone had today, but if you have additional questions, please feel free to reach out to any of us. Additionally, like I said at the beginning, I'll put the presentation, the slide deck and the recording in a box folder and send out the link for that afterwards. And if you could please remember to fill out that survey after you close your WebEx window, that'd be really helpful. So thanks again for tuning in, and we look forward to our next ZED talk on data privacy passports next month. Have a good rest of your day.
Great. Have a good one, everyone.